Hello everyone, welcome to this session of Talking Tech, Women and Girls in ICT. My name is Nabhanita Dey and today I'm delighted to be representing internships.org as its founder and CEO, aimed towards helping caregivers return to work after gap in career. Through internships.org, I've developed a free transformative course which focuses on helping people to return to work. So we cover various modules like preparing stay-at-home caregivers to return to work and be ready to sit at the interview table of today's return to work opportunities through inspiring them through our Returnships podcast, which tells stories of women who have returned to work, helping people find themselves, providing grassroots level training like learning English and computer science, or what skills and jobs are relevant in today's industry. Telling them about company structures to providing advanced level career training like places to get free returnships or trainings and certifications, and further advancing them to online skills like how to build an online resume or portfolio. If people are still feeling stuck, we connect them to career coaches, mentors, therapy, and then finally, when they are ready, we connect them to internship opportunities. To check out our work, go to www.returnships.org. Today, I'm very excited to be having a discussion about tech and careers with Gabriela Ramos. Welcome, Gabriela. She is the Deputy Director General for the Social and Human Sciences in UNESCO, Chief of Staff and Sherpa at OECD. She oversees the contributions of the institution to build inclusive and peaceful societies. Her agenda includes the achievement of social inclusion and gender equality, advancing youth development, promotion of values through sports, anti-racism and anti-discriminatory agenda, and ethics of AI. Her appointment at UNESCO allows her to continue supporting an agenda of inclusive growth and the respect of human rights and human dignity. Mrs. Ramos has been involved in developing rules for the games for technological issues in the international arena, starting at OECD as the Chief of Staff in Sherpa, where she was involved in launching of the digital strategy of the OECD that has become the pillar for the organization's prominent role in this field. She has then took this to the G20 and worked with China to deliver through their presidency in 2015 a blueprint for innovation and digital transformation. This led to the inclusion of digital and AI issues in G20, with Germany, Argentina, and Japan adopting contributions that OECD provided. Gabriela oversaw, for example, the report on the gender divide. She also ensured that the principles of AI at OECD were adopted at the G20. This is why she was hired at UNESCO to oversee from the Secretariat the development of the AI of ethics recommendation. In all this work, she has contributed to the frame a technological transformation that is inclusive and that does not open the door for higher inequalities. Talking Tech is a series celebrating girls and women in tech being recorded around the world between Girls in ICT Day 2020 and Girls in ICT Day 2022. Girls in ICT Day is an international day marked on the fourth Thursday of each April. In 2021, Girls in ICT was held on 22 April. The objectives of Girls in ICT Day are to help to create a global environment that empowers and encourages girls and young women to consider studies and careers in the growing field of information and communication technologies. The Talking Tech series is brought to you by the ITU, the UNICC, and the Office of the UN Secretary General Envoy on Youth, and is in support of Equals, the global partnership for gender equality in this digital age. I'm pleased to be a partner on this session today. The goals of this series include to interest and inspire girls and young women with information and range about ICT careers that have had, bring a broader audience, some of the role model women in tech, and share information about their careers and work, offer diverse examples of how ICT is used to support achievement of sustainable development goals and the other UN goals, showcase initiatives that are working with girls to support ICT and future ICT careers, and further provide girls and young women in tech with leadership opportunity to represent and promote girls in tech organizations with which they are involved and to promote it to a broader international audience. As you can see, more gender balanced tech sector is something I'm passionate about and working towards. So I'm delighted to now shift the conversation with Gabriela Ramos. Welcome, Gabriela, to IECT Conversation today. I'm so curious to get to know you, and so does our audience who is watching you today. My first question to you is like, how did you get into the technology careers?
Well, I got from the public policy perspective. because I'm not like you, Navanita, or like many other girls that are really into the technological developments and developing the services and the products that these technologies can provide. I really got there through my interest in public policy. My career has been related to working with governments to improve the evidence base of their policies and also to understand better how the economy and the society works and how the technological progress that we are witnessing is really having a massive impact in the way we operate. The fact is that when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and when you look at the objectives that humankind has really decided on in the context of the United Nations systems and in the context of UNESCO, where I am sitting for, there are major trends that you cannot ignore. You cannot ignore inequalities. And the post-COVID pandemic really showed how bad it was, and it got worse. You cannot ignore demography, which in some countries mean that they will be aging very fast. In some others, with huge pressure for young cohorts to get jobs or to have opportunities. You cannot ignore climate change. And across that set of trends and impacts, one that is really redefining the economy and the society is the technological transformation. The digital transformation, the role of artificial intelligence in everything we do. And therefore, if you want to really deliver as public service, as governments, we need to understand this better. And this is what I did at the OECD. And this is what attracted me towards UNESCO, because they are dealing with this important technological progress from the perspective of how to develop the better policy frameworks.
That is awesome. I mean, I'm very, very curious to learn about what your career has been like at UNESCO till now. I know you've mentioned a little bit about like what you did with OECD. So, please tell us about your career journey till now and what prompted you to join UNESCO.
Well, the fact is that I was the Sherpa at the OECD to the G20. And as you know, the G20 gathers the 20 major economies in the world, including the US and India, China, Canada, the G7 plus Mexico. And I was not, I mean, governments and countries are the ones that advance their commitments on different areas. But I was representing the OECD and therefore putting there our view of what the challenges was. And as I said, understanding the digital transformation, understanding the pervasiveness, understanding how it is impacting the labor markets or the health sectors or the education sector, understanding the digital divides. All of this is really important because these technologies don't happen in a vacuum. It's like the electricity or like a telephony or like television. These are path-breaking technologies, in some cases like electricity, general purpose technologies, and this is the way that artificial intelligence is also evolving. And therefore, they have this possibility of impact every sector, every segment in our lives. And that's what they're doing. So we don't have a framework. Countries have very different views. Some countries still have the view that the big platforms, the big tech, are too young to have heavy regulatory frameworks. The US is more laissez-faire, like Japan. Europe has a more hands-on kind of legislative vision, including in the directives that they now are reviewing in terms of framing the digital divide. And therefore, my passion has always been, how do we get a common narrative? How do we get countries to understand the trust of the challenges? Because these are developments that are driven by the private sector, by companies that are super fast. It took 50 years for 25% of the society in the US to benefit from electricity. It took 10 years for telephony. And it took only 4 years for all of us to get an iPhone, 25% in the population of the US. So it's very fast. And therefore, I have been working with members to develop frameworks that will create trust for these technologies to be developed, but at the same time to control the downsides. And one of the most important initiatives that are taking place, and that's why I moved from the OECD to UNESCO, is this global standard, because it's 193 countries with very different perspectives from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, from Latin America, to provide an ethical framework for the development of these technologies. And what does that mean? It means that we are all in love with the technological developments. We're all thinking about the algorithms, and we're thinking about how to use these services and what products they are going to bring. what services they're going to bring in the health sector, in the education sector. But the fact is that it should be the other way around. We should be asking how these technologies are going to help us to deliver more inclusive societies, to reduce inequalities. How are they helping or not with our climate goals? How are they helping with gender equality, which is not really the case as of today? I was just now coming out from the negotiations. I hope that we will be able to deliver a recommendation. Tomorrow is the last day of our discussions. We still have 17 paragraphs to go, but I feel that we will have something very good, a global approach on the ethical reflection and the development of artificial intelligence to make it more diverse and more inclusive.
I think AI ethics is definitely something, it has sparked a lot of conversation in today's media because AI is definitely something up and coming. However, like what you talked about is like making it much more inclusive. That is something that we have seen through so many different movies that have been coming out of like how sometimes AI would discriminate between people or between skin colors or things like that. So as you're pursuing like AI ethics at UNESCO, how do you think AI ethics, like how is it crucial in tomorrow's world solutions, and what are some of the things that we need to look for in AI ethics when we are developing our algorithms?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is to ensure that in democratic societies that have well-developed frameworks to protect human rights, to advance human dignity, to provide opportunities for all, that framework that we have developed for the real world, for the offline world, that we also have it in the digital world. So what are we doing? We are reassuring that the principles that we have, first, the respect of human rights and the values that we have as humanity, living in peace, living in harmony, solidarity, diversity, inclusiveness, are translated into the online world, that accountability is clear, that transparency is there, that explainability is there. More and more services are using artificial intelligence to take decisions in terms of who gets a job, who gets an interview, who gets a credit from the bank, who gets accepted to which university. More and more different institutions, different universities, different job providers are using these technologies to take decisions. And as you say, if there are biases, if there are stereotypes, if there are discriminatory traces in the data set or in the way we develop the algorithms, at the end, the outcomes are going to be unfair. And we need to prevent that. We need to prevent that because, first of all, these are technologies that are highly concentrated in few countries and also in terms of their development. Even though they are widely used worldwide, the fact is that their development and the data gathering and the data ownership is really in few countries and in few companies. But if you don't ensure that the way you build up these developments is really inclusive and it's bias-free, then you get the kind of outcomes that we have witnessed in terms of facial recognition technologies not recognizing women or Black people because all of the data that was generated to do the review was based only on white male. Or when you know that the financial sector is using also massive amount of these technologies to determine who is credit worthy. And probably the data sets are not the most inclusive because at the end, women are less represented and some minority communities are less represented. So this is what we're trying to do. But we do not only stay with the framework, the transparency, the privacy, all these things that you are very well aware of. We also advance policy recommendations on education, culture, on science, on the issues that are core to UNESCO, but also a very strong chapter on gender and girls, a very strong chapter on environment, a very important tool, which is the ethical impact assessment. We are calling on everybody that is related to the development of these technologies to use the UNESCO ethical impact assessment and also to have a readiness index because countries are also lagging behind and we need to support them. So it's quite an intense negotiation. As I said, tomorrow will be the last day. We hope that it will be approved in the General Conference this year, but it provides with a fantastic blueprint to avoid discrimination, to avoid harm, to avoid misuse, to avoid hate speech, to avoid the kind of mental health problems that is creating among our children, among our youth. So all of those things are there. We have a very positive approach to technologies. We believe that it's amazing what these technologies can make and what the businesses can make. But the reality is that if we don't control the downsides, trust will be not there. And therefore, we will see a rejection of these technologies, which is not good for anybody. So hopefully it will work. It's a global standard for the very first time. There are many institutions doing these kind of principles, but UNESCO is the only one that is doing it in a universal format.
So I actually got my master's in AI and machine learning, and I have been actually working in data. So like what you provided was like an excellent advice, especially for data scientists or people working in AI and tech in general. And I completely agree that today's data are very biased towards it's overfitted sometimes, so it doesn't even like detect the things that you mentioned. Like there is a huge amount of conversation that has sparked. So my next question to you on that is, how do you like, based on everything that you've seen about AI and the development, do you feel like people should trust AI at this point, or are there any tips that you would want to give our viewers on how they should perceive AI as all the developments are happening currently?
I think we need to bulletproof AI. So even if you see sometimes fantastic services, not like for the diagnosis of illness, it seems that the use of AI combined with the medical practitioners, it's really achieving a level of accuracy that would not be possible for people. But the reality is that there are some angles that we really need to take care of. One of those is the fact that there is half of the world population that is not connected to internet. And so the digital divides are already there. And we saw it with COVID. We saw that many children were not really having access to platforms or to continue their school, while others were completely well provided with these issues. So the digital divide is very important. And why am I talking about the digital divide related to the problems that you mentioned? Because as I said, if the developments are concentrated in certain groups and certain countries, then these biases will advance. Because our societies are biased, because we have our prejudices, because it exists. AI is human made. So when you translate your own biases into without any kind of checkpoint, which is exactly what we're trying to do, you will deliver these problems. One of the angles, given that I'm talking to a fantastic technological girl, is that women are completely underrepresented. This is something we did for the Australian presidency. It was not the Australian presidency. Australia asked us to do it for the Japanese presidency of the G20 in 2019. We worked on a very good study to look at how much women were represented in AI. It was really a path-breaking work, because it was not only the fact that information and technology careers attract less women. I'm sure that you were surrounded by a lot of boys, but it's also the fact that even those that study don't go to the sector because it's really competitive, highly demanded, and then the balance between family is not possible. But then on top, 80% of the developments of these technologies are done by male-only teams. And therefore, how could you ensure diversity or the lack of discrimination if it is only done by certain groups in certain countries? So one of the issues that we are calling for, besides the principles that I mentioned on accountability and all of those things, is to have diverse teams. And it sounds like, but that's not a big change. Well, it is. And this, we say it also in the analog world. Whenever I see governments that have only male ministers with male presidents, so where is the diversity? Where is the diversity bringing different cultures? Where is the diversity bringing different languages? Where is the diversity? The world is diverse. So these technologies need to represent better the world in which we live in, instead of imposing one cultural framework because it'll the place in which they happen. So it's very important that we ensure that diversity is represented in the technologies, that gender is not really, because one thing is to use the technologies for trafficking or really the harms that it can do for girls, but the fact is that they are not represented. And we really need to make mandatory, and this is something that the ethical recommendation of UNESCO is doing mandatory affirmative action in terms of representation in the universities, in terms of representation in the sector, in terms of representation in the management, because women bring different perspective. And this is almost a bulletproof for the technologies not to go in the wrong direction without nobody raising their hand and the bell to say, watch out. So these are the kind of things that we're trying to address.
Absolutely. I mean, like being a woman in tech, I have definitely seen that. I still feel like not 50-50 yet, it's like much less, and especially because of pandemic. There's so many women who have to like leave their jobs and leave their careers, and it has pushed the percentages of women representation even further, like even further from 1988. So my follow-up question to is like for somebody like, so I'm working in an organization called returnship.org where we are helping women to go back to work after they have had a gap in career. Now that you're in AI ethics, do you have any suggestions for somebody who is trying to get into AI ethics or AI in general?
Well, I think that for the girls, it's very important to get the skills. Even if you go into a break, you need to continue upskilling yourself because the market is super fast. And therefore, is it upon you the responsibility of continue to be aware of what are the latest developments and to keep on learning the digital skills that are so necessary for this world. But I would say I will not put it on the girls to solve the digital divide. It's not for the girls.
Yes.
I would say it's super important, and we say it in our recommendation, it's super important to encourage higher education institutions to ensure that there is a balance, to encourage more girls. It's very important in the policy framework to avoid that our education systems reproduce the bias and stereotypes that deliver this very unequal world for women, whereby women is in charge of the family, women is in charge of children, women is in charge of the house. Well, no. And when you see the stereotypes or the role models, is always the man who is no in a very active position. No, it's nothing bad. I'm a mother. I have a wonderful house. I am married. I love my children. I took care of them. But the reality is that our societies should provide for men also shouldering the efforts of raising children or the care economy, the unpaid work at home, because in that context and looking for that balance for the girls, I would say choose who you live with because you need to have somebody that will shoulder the effort and that will see that raising children is a shared responsibility. But what governments can do is to have dual parental leave and for companies not to discriminate, because they discriminate on the basis that if the couple is going to have children, they will not promote the woman because she's the one that is going to take care of it. I think it's very important that we have dual parental leave that will mean that men will also need to leave the job when they go to take care of homes. So it's a societal change that is massive. And to start with, I would say something that I did in Mexico, Germany has done it, the UK has done it, which is to eliminate gender stereotyping in textbooks in the schools. This starts with even very early child care education. Take a look at the books. What is the image that they portray? A very strong man with the tie running and a very nice women knitting. Nothing wrong with that. I don't want to belittle whatever women want to do or whatever men want to do. But what I would say is that we need to have the same opportunities and the same options. And we should not be considering that women are born to be beautiful and men are born to be strong. And if we reproduce those stereotypes in our textbooks, how can we change society? So it's a combination, but more than anything, be aware. Be aware.
I think like what you mentioned about having those right role models at the very basic level, like when you're growing up, I think that can be transformative for at least tomorrow's generations where like small kids are growing up and they want to see people like girls want to see other girls in the media or in the news who are representing tech or representing like a work like somebody a scientist or something like that, and not just the classic Barbie who plays with like home things. It's great, but like we need more representation. So I think that is something you wonderfully said.
Oh, no, totally, because girls cannot be what they cannot see. That's why I launched also a program in Mexico, which is the STEM Niñas Pueden. I just brought all the role models that I found in Mexico doing a fantastic thing on technology, on science and natural sciences, to talk to girls in their 15 years, 14 years in the school system, just for them to see that you can be an astronaut, that you can be a scientist, you can be an engineer. And it's funny because I studied social science, but my dad wanted me to be an engineer. So when I was promoting engineering, he was saying, did I tell you to be an engineer? And I was like, shh, don't say it.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm very glad that you have had that. I think having supportive parents, especially when you're growing up, I think that is one of the other things that a lot of girls are missing. Where growing up, they are being taught that, certain things are for girls and certain things are for not, and having that education in the very basics are so important and becomes like the telling for the entire life, basically.
Well, let me tell you that this has been even proven scientifically, because in the PISA report that the OECD that measures performance of students at 15-year-old, we also ask the strong performers, girls, if they feel or they will auto-qualify themselves as good. Only 30% said they were, while male, it was 60%. When they were good, we were addressing the girls that are good at maths, but they don't define themselves because, as you say, the society, the house is always limiting the ambitions and the perspectives, no? You expect less from your girls. I'm sorry, but that's a fact. And I would call on families, because I'm sure that your family did not expect low for you, because that's why you are.
Yes.
But it's not the same in all the families. The majority said, no, my girl it's fine. No, she's not going to be an engineer. No, she's not going to go to this. And they don't do it because they are bad parents. They do it because they care about their girls and they don't want them to be exposed, or they don't want them to go to a world that is so aggressive. But the reality is that they got their wings.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I 100% agree. Like, I've grown up in India, so I've definitely seen so many girls, like I'm thankful that my parents have been very supportive. They constantly challenge me, want me to be entrepreneur, want me to do these things, but I've not seen the same things in so many other people. So it's heartbreaking to like have that experience, like growing up, seeing all these girls go through these. And I think that is why, like, we are like, I'm able to like share this platform with you today because, like, I feel like I have that in me where I want to like be that representation for so many different girls
Yeah.
who are working. And and you are an amazing role model. Like everything that you've said until now, I think they inspire the people so much. Like especially everybody who's watching. Like like what Gabriela said is like you have to like at some point like you have to become your own role model. I guess at some point if you do not have that.
Totally. You need to tell yourself, I can do it. I can do it. We all have fears. We all have doubts. We are humans. That's just normal.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to have this trigger that will always tell you, go for it. Go for it, even if it is difficult, because it's the only way to go far, to raise the expectations, raise the bar for our girls, and raise the bar for ourselves. And then when you arrive to a good port, you're like, okay, it was feasible. No?
Definitely. So I want to shift gears a little bit and know about you a little bit more. So I want to ask you if there anything that you're exclusively proud of in your tech journey until now.
I'm so proud to have brought the gender equality discussion to a world that was completely comfortable not talking about that, which was the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, an organization that was completely focused on economic development. And during my 20 years in that place and being the chief of staff and the Sherpa, I moved the agenda for more inclusive societies and also for gender equality. And I still remember that in 2012, when I launched the gender strategy for economic empowerment, because that's the angle I provided. I mean, I couldn't bring every agenda on gender because member countries were not used to talk about gender in that moment. They realized how important it was. And then I took it to the G20. And I remember talking to Sherpas because they were asking themselves where the new sources of growth will come, because it was 2011 after the financial crisis in 2008. Growth was not resuming as it should. There were so many problems. Jobs were not being created. And then the G20, the Sherpas, started asking themselves, where is growth going to come from? And I said, women. Why don't we bring more women into the labor market? Because there are huge gaps, from 6% in Canada in terms of women and men participating in the labor force, to 30% in Mexico, 40% in Turkey, is 55% in Saudi Arabia. I was thinking, you know what? All of our governments have invested a lot in girls' education. But then if they cannot really use their skills, our economies lose. It was not easy. Many Sherpas were still telling me, that's not for leaders. Of course, I was so offended because I was thinking, how could you say that half of the population in the world is not for leaders? And at the end, we managed to get a target. And all the leaders of the G20 committing to reduce the gap in labor force participation between men and women. And what does that mean? It means that Korea got their dual parental leave. It means that Japan is making more hirings for women in different sectors that were forbidden before. It means that Saudi Arabia is making an amazing progress in terms of starting to recognize rights for women. So I'm super proud. And that's why I also came to UNESCO, because this systemic impact, you see it now. Every time there is a summit on the G7 or on the G20, there is a gender angle. And that was something that I can say I contributed. I'm super proud. And I will continue doing it, because I think that all of us have a responsibility to push this agenda, because if not, it's going to be very slow.
We are so proud of you for doing this. Like, thank you for like paving the way for so many women. I mean, having that dual parental leave, I think that will be so helpful for so many women across all these countries. So thank you for doing that. So, I mean, we learned about your impeccable like work and career. I want to know about like, were there any points in your journey in your career that you had a certain challenge, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, yeah. We always have it, Navanita, because I was like you, and I was like many girls your age, in which you feel that we are equal, because you compete with your skills, you compete with your efforts, you compete with your dedication, and therefore it's merit-based. And in the school or in the jobs, you feel that you are equal. The reality is that as soon as you have children, the divergences start to be very clear in terms of the lack of support. And I have to say that I always had fantastic bosses, and my husband is fantastic. So no doubt that they provided me for having part-time jobs and keeping my level of decision making. But the reality is that we have these very different needs, and therefore we should have some ways of leveling the playing field. It's not to say that we are equal, because we're not. We have very different needs, but we should not be in the world in which women, because we are the ones that carry the baby, are the ones that are going to take care of them, or the care economy, as we have seen it. So it was tough, but I have to say that you need to surround yourself with people that believe in equality. Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your couple, your parents, that's super important. And that you can choose. You cannot choose your parents, but you can choose who do you stay with in life. Who is going to be championing what kind of job. If you see a company that is not gender friendly, run away. You have nothing to do there. So it's just these very strategic decisions that as a person you need to do. But I would say that as a woman, you really need to be super careful.
Absolutely. I completely believe that, your partner is something you can choose, and, the people you surround with kind of determine the kind of work you want to do and the mindset you have. So absolutely agree with you there. So I have one last question. I'm sure like people want to know is like, for the young girls who are coming up right now, who are trying to get into tech, are there any advice or any parting thoughts you want to like tell them, like that kind of gives the essence of who you want tomorrow's girls or tomorrow's female leaders to be?
I would say that the most important advice, not only for women in tech, but for women in general, but particularly for women in tech, because it's a very male-dominated sector and very competitive and very aggressive. I would say self-confidence is key. Self-confidence. Never lose your own confidence. Even if it is difficult, I mean, if you are well prepared, if you do the highest effort, if you really invest yourself in being at the top of the issues, don't be discouraged, because it's a difficult world. I would say that you should always believe in yourself, because that's the most important message that women that have succeeded received since they were young, that you can do it. And it might look obvious. There is no holy grail. There is no simple recipes, but it's true that because of the way the world is organized, women usually tend to have more doubts and to have less confidence in themselves. And that's terrible, because one thing is that the world puts you obstacles. Another thing is that you put obstacles to yourself. And so never do that. You can do it. Be straight in the face and say, yes, I can do it, and be confident, because that will take you very, very far.
I'm so inspired by, I think it's gonna like, your inspiring words is gonna stick with me. for the rest of this month, because I think whatever you said, it's so true that, women itself, we have people talk about imposter syndrome. And I have myself have felt that multiple points where I'm like, am I doing my best or am I the best? And we have this self-doubt, and sometimes we kind of hinder ourselves from taking the opportunities that do exist, and we self-doubt. I haven't seen a lot of other people do that. So I definitely agree that, in 2021 we need to have self-confidence and we need to go for the things we want to. So thank you
Total.
so much, Gabriela, for this entire talk. I'm sure the people who are watching will be so inspired, and I am sure that the work that you're doing with UNESCO, it is going to affect and change so many lives of so many women, especially around gender equality, parental leave, AI ethics, and all of the amazing lessons you mentioned today would be so great for everybody. So thank you so much for coming on our show today and talking about all of these issues. Thank you. Thank you a lot.
Thanks to you. Thanks you for providing me this opportunity to reach out to this wonderful group. I wish you the best, and I'm looking forward to hearing the wonderful things that you will all be delivering for gender equality and for yourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you.